Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're just going to wait a few moments while people begin to come into the room. I think we have about 12 or 13 people in attendance already, and we're anticipating around about 30 people joining us. So what I will do in the meantime, I'll just share with you our first slide, which gives you an idea of the kind of code of conduct and how the Q&A session will run, and also some questions regarding accessibility. And probably in about 1304, 1305, we'll make a start. Okay, I'll make a start now. I haven't got sight of the text function at this moment in time, so if any messages come up, I'm kind of relying on my co-host, Professor Jemina Napier, you now see in your screen. So good afternoon and welcome to what is the second and a repeat session of our Flexible Fund Round 1 webinar. We did run a session last week that was presented by Kate Sang and Robert McIntosh. We're running the same session effectively again, so this may be an opportunity for people to ask further questions if you attended the previous one, but if not, it's wide open for questions for people who clearly, and most of you probably almost certainly didn't. So I'll spend about 15 to 20 minutes introducing you to the caucus, or EDICa, as we've been calling it, and the flexible round 1. So please use this time to think of any questions that you might have. There is an FAQ, a list of FAQs on our website, and we will update our, sorry, I should probably move on to the next slide. There is an FAQ on our website, and the details of our website and a range of other contact details can be found on this particular slide as well. So what we're hoping to do today is that if any kind of questions or queries that come up, please put them to us, and please use the chat function if that's what you prefer. And ultimately, if you prefer to speak and put your hand up, then that's also an option that we can consider once we get to the questions part in around about 15 minutes time. Hopefully everybody as well got a chance to digest the code of conduct for today's webinar, got at least a general overview of the question and answer session that we have today, plus any kind of accessibility details. We do have a couple of people on hand. We've got Chiara and Fenella from the caucus who will be on hand as well. If there are any kind of issues, then please just put them into the chat function and we'll deal with them as best as we possibly can in the time that we have. Okay, so in terms of the agenda, what we're going to go through with you today is provide details of the caucus, or as I said before, we call in the caucus EDICa. EDICa stands for the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Caucus, and we felt that that was a lot to kind of remember or to say to people, and we came up with what we feel is a nicer way in which to kind of capture what we're about, and that's EDICa. So we will use the terms EDICa and caucus and EDI caucus interchangeably, but they all mean effectively the same things. So we'll provide some details, say why it's been set up, details of the flexible fund, which I presume that everybody's here really to hear about, and how that particularly relates to year one of the flexible funds. Just to kind of give you a general idea, if you're not aware already, we plan to have 3 flexible fund calls in total over the scope of EDICa. We're going to have one now, we're going to have one in 2024, we're going to have one in 2025, but I'll give you more details of that as we go. But this is essentially about the first round, which is open now. It's also going to go details of what you might need to do if you are considering an application. And then following this, there'll be a Q&A session. And we plan to be here until about 2 o'clock. But if we deal with all the questions before then, we will obviously finish earlier. So first of all, EDICa, or the EDI Caucus initiative, as we're calling it, has been funded to the tune of around about £4.2 million. The funding comes from UKRI, or largely from UKRI, with 5 funders joining forces. That's the ESRC, the AHRC, EPSRC, BBSRC, and Innovate UK. And obviously, as you can see on this particular slide, we've got the British Academy. EDICa has been funded since the beginning of 2023, January, although during such time, we spent quite a lot of time recruiting staff and getting our projects going. And it's really now, we're really kind of getting some momentum, and we're really excited to announce the details of the flexible fund. And very shortly into 2024, I will be announcing details of flexible funds round 2. Okay, so what I want to just tell you, first of all, I've got about 4 quick slides, just running you through who EDICa is. EDICa is in principle based at Heriot-Watt University here in Edinburgh. First here is the management team, including myself and Jemina. We also have Catherine from the British Geographical Society. Clay is also from Heriot-Watt as well. Robert is based at Northumbria, and we also have key support from Lizzie, Fenella and Rustam. So importantly, this slide identifies the key roles within EDICa. So as you can see, Kate is the principal investigator of the whole project. Jemina is the deputy PI and EDI lead. Then you've got Robert, myself and Kate as well, who are the leaders of each particular work stream. So we're talking about work stream today, so Kate is ultimately the main focus here. So we also have a range of co-investigators, again, spread out much widely than Heriot-Watt University. We've got Nima and Raffaella, who are based at Heriot-Watt as well, but we also have Jason, who's based at Cambridge. We've got Mata, who's at Kingston. Diane is based at Loughborough. Marion is at Glasgow. We've got Nile, who's at Imperial College. And Will is with Autonomy, which is an independent research organisation that looks at a range of contemporary issues, such as climate change and the future of work. And I think more recently they've done some work on the 4-day week, trialling them in certain parts of the UK. But again, more importantly here is perhaps to kind of see these as being key roles and how they may relate to the particular flexible fund calls, and obviously this one being round one or work stream one. In terms of our researchers, we've assembled a great team of PDRAs. We've got Chiara, who's actually on the call here as well. We've got Joss and Kat and Siddhartha. All 4 of these are based at Heriot University, either physically or remotely in some senses of the word. And we've also got Stephanie, who's associated with Workstream 2, and she's based with Robert at Northumbria. In terms of partners, just some quick details. The slide effectively speaks for itself. We've got the National Museum of Scotland. We've got Dr. Alison Harvey, who is an expert on digital inclusivity and accessibility, who's joining us from York University in Ontario, Canada. We've also got the CDT Summer, or the Centre for Doctoral Training and Sustainable Management, and they're based at Plymouth University. And also we've got EDICa, or the Industrial Decarbonisation Research Innovation Centre. They're also based here at Heriot University. So just before I get to the details and probably what you really want to know more of the most of the Flexible Fund, I'll just kind of detail the purpose and ethos of EDICa. And it's important to kind of digest this in one sense, because this is a way in which you probably might want to consider how you frame and anchor what you have in mind with this call for proposals related to Workstream 1 and the Flexible Round 1. So I'll read from the slide, but importantly, like I said, this is, these are really important to kind of frame things around. So our vision for the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Caucus, EDICa, is to create inclusive research innovation cultures, enabling diverse researchers to access and thrive in careers across research and innovation systems, removing barriers to full participation experienced by women, disabled, LGBTQTI and racialized minoritized researchers and researchers with current responsibilities. EDICa will act as a focal point, identifying, evaluating and synthesizing EDI initiatives across the research innovation systems, ensuring research addresses the needs of a diverse range of stakeholders. Using evidence reviews, our own projects, the management of a flexible fund, EDICa will coordinate and disseminate interdisciplinary research to address the stubborn inequalities which persist across the research innovation ecosystems, creating national and international communities of practice equipped to build the inclusive research cultures urgently required. So just kind of like one kind of thing to draw out from the final sentences as such is that EDICa is based around projects that the team that you've seen introduced to you already have set up. I'll tell you a little bit more about one of those things as we go along. What we're really looking for is an extension to this, in the sense that each of the 3 work streams will require people to submit their proposals, and for which we have 3 flexible funding calls, and with one being the main thing of interest today. Okay, so now we get into the really important stuff, and presumably again while you're all here today, we have, as part of the block allocation of funds for EDICa, around about £1 million set aside to commission research. That's divided between the 3 work streams. Workstream 1, which today is very much about the career life cycle. Workstream 2, which is run by Rob McIntosh, based at Northumbria University, that's about the research process. And Workstream 3, which I'm responsible for, that's about the organisation of work. So the last 2 you'll hear more about in the coming months and year or so, in terms of the flexible funding calls related to them. So this is the first flexible fund call and is based on Workstream 1. So that means we've got roughly, or around about in the region of about £317,000 and that's going to be allocated on a basis of 80% FEC or FEC or full economic costs. So just importantly, the successful applicants will, for any of the flexible funding calls, will be characterised by core design. In other words, just for example, if it's aimed at improving the career opportunities of women or disabled people, then the project should involve some kind of core design process involving women or disabled people, or both, just depending on what you're actually interested in looking at. We're interested in practicing what we're preaching in some ways, so we really want to see apps and applications from marginalised researchers. Ultimately, the key aim is to create impact as well. So we don't necessarily expect to see impact within the lifetime of the actual project, but we do want to see evidence that there is scope for impact to come from the research that you've proposed. So just a few more details about workstream 1, which this flexible funding call relates to. So we're looking at the career life cycle, and that in a sense is about imagining a career in research and innovation for people traditionally excluded or marginalised. So just to be clear though, this is not just entirely about researchers and innovators. It can also be about people who work in the professional services related to this. So the research could focus on lab managers. It could also focus on technicians and professional service teams as well. It's not just about research and innovators per se, but that might be what your research proposal is based on. So it must focus on careers and, more importantly, addressing inequalities in careers. And it's probably helpful to steer in some way towards what the impact on careers in such context has been affected by the pandemic. Just to kind of restate this, just because this is absolutely critical for any application, such proposals must be based on co-designed research. It must be based on trying to affect change, impact, in other words. The period of which we expect the research to be undertaken is around about 12 months. And just to be clear, and this may be one of the questions that you have in mind, we don't necessarily have one set figure in mind for each of the projects that we will fund for each of the flexible funding rounds. There is an upper limit, as you saw before, of around about £317,000, and that just sets the upper limit. Ultimately, the key issue is excellence. We're looking to fund what we believe to be excellent projects, things that we feel that will make an important difference related to the career life cycle. So just a kind of an overview, something that you might not be aware of, but some of you may well very much be aware of. We did have an expression of interest that closed around about a week or so ago. If you've submitted to the expression of interest, you should have received feedback on that, or if not, it will be imminent. Perhaps chase us up in a week's time if you've not actually received that, because we really do want to make sure that people who've taken the time and trouble to show their initial interest, that we give you some feedback on that. So ultimately, just a kind of a general feedback on this process. The key feedback has been around staying within the scope of flexible round 1. I probably should state as well, I was going to plan to mention this later on as well. We did have one question recently put to EDICa and the caucus about whether, if you hadn't submitted an expression of interest, whether that effectively means that you couldn't submit to a proposal, and that's not the case. It's just that if people saw the expression of interest and wanted to take part, then they have the benefit of that. But if you haven't expressed your interest in flexible fund round 1, you still can submit a proposal.
James,
so, sure.
I was just going to step in and say that for the future calls, that will not be the case. We will have more notification. There will be a longer lead time. but we will have mandatory expressions of interest for the future calls. But for this call, it was not mandatory.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification, Fenella. Hopefully that has clarified anything, but if not, please seek clarification further down the line. So we have around about 6 weeks until the deadline of the 31st of October. And once the call has been closed, we'll have an initial sifting process and we'll begin to identify reviewers. We have a range of people in mind, or people have already expressed a willingness to help us. So if you're interested in being involved in the review process, then please contact the caucus. We're still interested in hearing from such people, and successful applicants will be informed mid-December, just before Christmas, and we expect the projects will be commenced early 2024, and therefore end at the beginning or the end of 2024, early 2025. So just a kind of heads up in one sense about year two and the flexible fund round two, just some kind of overview of when this will actually happen. This is what we are currently initial planning. You've just heard from Fenella. The expression of interest will be a mandatory part of this particular process, and for call 3 and year 3. So we will pretty much begin the same process again early in 2024, except in this case, this will be led by Robert McIntosh and his work stream based around the reviewing process. So we're now on to the question and answer part. We've had a few questions in beforehand, but not many. So this is your chance to ask away, although note our website has got plenty of information on there about many of the things I've just mentioned already, and more broadly about EDICa, but also there's a list of FAQs, frequently asked questions, of which we will update later on as soon as we can after this particular session. There's also recordings of these sessions available on our EDICa website. Last week's is already on there, and I presume this will be added at some point in the not too distant future. So we just had one query about the focus of projects. One of the questions that was asked was, can the projects focus on anything to do with EDI? And unfortunately, the simple answer to that is that the proposal must meet the needs of the call. So proposals must focus on equalities or inequalities across career life cycles, must be co-designed with priority given to studies considering the impact of the pandemic on such careers. And that's one of the reasons why we have the expression of interest, so we could kind of head off any potential confusion or ambiguity, either in the messages that we communicated or how they were interpreted, of course. So just to kind of go through a couple of questions that we've had so far, just to kind of start things off. We had one question asking on the back of the application form, can you please provide any information or further information on how engaging with lived experience or marginalisation will be assessed? In this instance, you will have to provide an EDI plan, and within that, it will include details of how you are addressing and how you are led by the lived experience of marginalisation, and also in relation to a co-design process. Another question that we had was also about, is the financial competitiveness or value for money of the bid assessed? If so, what is the scoring metric for this, and or the proportion of the total marks that is given to the project finances stroke value for money? So it's not a question of competing against fellow applicants. It's about, are the costs justified, appropriate, and proportionate? You know, very much the same ideas that are associated with research funding calls that come from UKRI and its funding bodies within that. So it's just, we just have a section that's specifically marked, but we're looking for a clear justification of resources, standard process as far as we're aware, and our experience have told us as well. And also as well, there's been a comment on applications outside academia. We welcome such applications, but it must be an organisation that complies with funder regulations. And also within that, it's kind of been asked really as well whether co-Is could be from industry, and the answer to that is yes, they can come from industry as well. So I will now hand over the floor to any questions that people might have. I've not been keeping abreast of the chat function. I can see now a couple of questions, and I don't know whether we should probably start with those. Jemina, do you want to?
I've actually been answering a few as we go, so but
Okay.
I'm happy to in case people don't actually want to read them. So we've had one person ask if, because of people perhaps who are in the wider sort of research innovation field, professional services people, lab managers, technicians might not be used to applying or submitting research proposals. So they're asking how we might support people. James did kind of touch on that, saying that anybody who works in the research and innovation space can apply. So if people are technicians or in other roles, not necessarily academic roles, but we do encourage you to work in collaboration. So projects can have as many co-leads as you like, as per the SRC guidelines. So you'd normally have a project lead, and then you'll have co-leads, and you can there's no restriction on the number of co-leads. So if someone's less experienced, and this would apply whether they're an academic or someone who's a technician or in another role, to try and collaborate with someone perhaps who's a bit more experienced. But we are targeting people that haven't necessarily, or prioritising people rather, who haven't necessarily had external funding before. So we're actually expecting to get more applications from people that perhaps are less experienced, which is why we are encouraging collaborations. Somebody else has asked about the expression of interest. The expressions of interest are now closed for call 1, but in future years, like Fenella said, it will be a requirement. This time around, we literally just asked for a paragraph. It was just very brief, just to kind of, this is what we're thinking, and this is how we're thinking we might do it, so that we could just assess whether it fits with the call, and we could give feedback on what people might need to work on, and to sort of tailor their proposal to fit with the call more specifically. Next person's asked about how many projects we aim to fund. We actually have £1 million over 3 years, which roughly, breaks down to 333,000 per year. We have, among the team, kind of talked about what that might look like, but it's quite hard to estimate actually, because it really depends on the nature of the applications we get, the projects, the scale of the project, how much money people are asking for. So if we were going to split fairly, then we would say perhaps up to 10 projects of about 33,000 each, but there might be some that are awarded more and some slightly less. So it'll be a ballpark around 10, but it could be more and it could be less. Really, it really depends on the nature of the projects that come in, but you can at least see how much we've got each year to spend. Katrina has asked, if you apply in round 1, can you apply in round 2, whether you're successful or unsuccessful? I need to check with James and the others, but as far as I know, that's a yes. There's no restriction, was there? I think we'd agreed that there'll be no restriction if you apply in one round, that you can't apply in another round.
I mean, we can clarify that for certain, but I think it shouldn't be a reason why you can't apply for more than one round.
Yeah.
Clearly, it would be a different project, because each work stream and each funding round, the calls will be, there'll be some overlap, but very different in another sense.
Yeah, so we will clarify that, and we'll just double check with Kate as the PI, and we'll add it to the FAQs on the website. Somebody is asking about how people find each other to collaborate, and that's actually information that is included in the FAQs, because it has been asked before, and we're happy to try and hook people up. So if you are struggling to find someone to collaborate with, get in touch with us. You can email the EDI caucus email address, because we know who's expressed interest. For example, some people are looking at maybe similar topics, so that we can connect people together, or we might be able to make other suggestions. So do feel free to get in touch if you would like to sort of be connected with other people. Katrina's asked the question in relation to the first call about COVID-19 impact being past, also current. I think very much also current, because we know that there's another round of COVID going around, and people are still experiencing the impact of long COVID. So it's certainly not over. It's certainly not a past event. So we would definitely say any it just has to be related to COVID somehow, whether it was past, present, or even future.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can add just a little bit to that, because one of the studies that we are running that's been organised by the actual caucus, and that's from my work stream 3 on the organisation of work. We're currently running a survey that's about the impact of COVID on EDI, and effectively the term we're using is the medium-term effect. I mean, I think it probably would be presumptuous to make a guess at what the effect might be in 10 years' time, but I think we could probably do good research now that would give us an indication of what's the impact been since around about March 2020 up until now, and if not into the next few years, because as Jemina, you quite rightly point out, the pandemic is very much with us in terms of being the virus itself and all the dangers that that it poses, but also the fact that it has shifted the dynamics in so many different things. And clearly the focus we want to make is EDI, and within that, the 3 different areas of EDICa, the 3 different work streams, is the priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question from Harry about asking whether we could give a link or an explanation about what rounds 2 and 3 will include. I understand your point. You're saying presumably if your application is a better fit for those, then you won't succeed in this round. I mean, we are focusing on calls, proposals that fit with the call specification. So looking at COVID, the next 2 calls will not be looking at COVID. They'll be looking at other things, and we don't know for sure yet what they'll be, because embedded within EDICa is a co-design process. So we have an advisory board. So Kate is actually running the advisory board as we speak, literally at the same time. So being supported by Lizzie, our project manager. So we have an advisory board, and we've actually just put out a call for people who would like to express interest in being part of our co-design group, and then also part of our wider stakeholder group. So we'll be liaising with our co-design group, with our advisory board and other stakeholders about what's topical, what we need to see in the EDI space. So each call will actually be tailored. We're basically saying that each call will be tailored to fit each of our work streams. So this one is one work stream focused on COVID, which James is leading on. The next one might be linked to one of the other work streams, and then thirdly, the final work stream. So there'll be a fit with the work stream, but we won't know exactly what that call will look like just yet, because we are wanting to take advice and guidance from our co-design and stakeholder groups and advisory groups.
Yeah, it may just be worthwhile that you just check out our website and look at the different work streams, because as Jemina quite rightly points out, the finer details of what each of the next 2 calls will look like is yet to be decided, but they will fit within the 2 work streams that currently have not been really mentioned as much, apart from the one that we've just been talking about, the career life cycle. And obviously work stream 1, Robert's being about the research process, and also my own about the organisation of work.
Yeah. Somebody's asked, is it the case then that senior members of staff should not be PIs? We are trying to facilitate, in the interests of diversity and inclusion, we are trying to facilitate opportunities for earlier career academics to be able to lead on projects. We understand that some institutions actually have regulations around whether early career researchers can lead on projects, be PIs on projects. So basically what we're saying is, if you're from an institution that won't allow you to be a PI, get in touch with us, because what we would like to do is support you to try and find a way to still be able to apply. So it might mean being a co-lead on a project with a more senior member of staff, but with the sort of clear expectation that the ECR, or the person that hasn't previously been a PI on an externally funded project, will be the project lead. But it might be that they need to be a co-lead with someone who's more senior in order for your institution to approve the submission. So we are, it's a flexible fund, so we are trying to be flexible about that, but we do want to prioritize opportunities for people that perhaps experience more barriers in accessing funds in that way.
Can I just clarify on that one, Jemina? So if somebody is an experienced PI and they are interested in the flexible fund, can you answer that same question from that perspective of somebody who's not interested, but they're on the more experienced end of the spectrum?
So again, we would encourage them to then, if they are wanting to apply, we want to make sure that they actually bring on board somebody else who's not as experienced, who has to give them the opportunity to be co-lead on a project. So even if they can't be the primary project lead, they still have the opportunity to take on responsibility. So for example, if we look at, I've got the copy of the FAQs here, and definitions of project lead and project co-lead, and the co-leads can be UK or international, by the way. So the project lead is responsible for the intellectual leadership and overall management of the project. And usually a project should only have one project lead, but a project co-lead is also a member of the project leadership and management team, and they could take over the leadership of the project if it was required, and you can have as many as you like. So to be a project co-lead, you have to be affiliated with one of the research organisations that's involved in submitting the application. So senior academics can be involved, but we want to see opportunities for less experienced ones to be involved as well.
Thank you.
We've got a couple more questions. So Angelo's asking, can the project focus on EDI in a single discipline, or needs to cover the experience across disciplines? No, it can be in one discipline, but it's open to all disciplines. I mean, obviously we are very heavily based in social sciences, and so that's actually more of our focus. And we do encourage interdisciplinary work, but we're not prescribing which disciplines should be involved at all. I don't know if James, you wanted to add anything to that.
I don't think so. I think you've captured that nicely, Jemina.
Someone else has asked, given the short deadline, do we need to get support letters from all proposed partners for the co-design, and will this impact the assessment of the proposal? Yes, actually, you do need to provide a support letter, because it actually confirms the viability and the feasibility of a study. So because if we agree to fund a study, as you know, you only have a maximum of 1 year. And so if it then takes time to secure the support necessary, that would eat too much time into the project. So we are asking for people to provide evidence of support letters with their applications as well. And it might mean that you feel that there is too much of a short time frame for this particular call, but you could start thinking about reaching out to potential partners for the next call, which, as James said earlier on, will be much earlier in the year next year. So we're actually looking to release the call in the very early stages of 2024. So it means that you've got a few months to start building some project connections and thinking about what you might like to do. As I just said earlier on, we don't know exactly what that call is going to entail just yet, but you could at least start thinking about what kinds of things you might be wanting to do in that EDI space, research and innovation space, and reaching out to potential project partners if you need that bit more time to develop that connection. And this
I think the only thing I would probably add to that really is that for certain, especially if a partner is absolutely critical for the research to happen, and if that's the case, then it couldn't be clearer that you would need a support letter. Clearly, some projects can involve an array of partners, some of which you may not be as central to certain partners, let's say. So, a narrative that would say that potentially other supports would be haven't been achieved at this moment in time, probably wouldn't weaken your application. But if you are relying on certain partners for the viability of the project, as Jemina says, I think it's absolutely critical that those are done. And as kind of Jemina said already, that if that's the case, then you probably should need to get those in place as soon as possible.
I mean, we will make allowances for, like, if, for example, you have been liaising with a project partner or partners, and if this is any partner, whether they're academic partners or non-academic partners, you'll need to have a support letter. If you are not able to secure a support letter in time for the submission deadline, but one is coming, then you can say that in your application and say that there has been a commitment, even if you've got an email saying yes, a letter of support is coming. And then if you're successful in your funding application, then we will need to see the support letters before any funding is released. So if, what we would say is try and get it by the application stage. If you really can't, but you're confident that you can get it in time to roll out the project if you were successful, then please just mention that in your application. Last question we've got is, will you fund proposals that fit with the work stream but not focused on the impact of COVID? Not for this call. So we had a long discussion about that, and we've agreed that the priority will be about the impact of COVID in relation to that particular work stream, so that it actually helps us with more focus and applicants with more focus as well. And I think that's all the questions in the Q&A. I can't see if anyone has a raised hand. Doesn't look like anyone has a hand raised. But we've answered 11 questions. As James said, the FAQs are on the website, and we'll get some clarification about whether you can apply for more than one, and we'll add that information to the website before the end of the week, as soon as we can. So I suppose that's over to you to see if there's any other questions or comments.
Can't see it at this moment in time. I suppose there's still scope for one or two more. But what I will do, I'll just quickly kind of show you just the final two slides, really, and that might prompt people to potentially ask further questions. I'm not sure. So I really just want to kind of inform you more generally about what's happening with EDICa. We've had this planned for some time, but just to kind of let people know who's not aware of it already, but we actually planning a range of seminar series as part of setting up the caucus over the next few years. And we start the launch of that with an in-conversation piece just tomorrow. So if that's something that you're interested in being involved in, then there's still places if you want to join us. And also as well, I kind of mentioned already that all of the work streams have their own projects that are run by the people who are directly part of the caucus, one of which relates to work stream 3 on my own particular work stream. And we're currently running a survey that looks at the medium-term impacts of COVID on EDI in the research and innovation ecosystem. And that's a survey that's open to researchers, innovators, whatever industry you come from, not necessarily working for universities. And also, it's also open to people such as research and innovation managers, professional services people, lab technicians, etc. We can send that link if it's not been put into the chat function at some point further on. But obviously, there's a QR code there as well for people who might be watching this back afterwards. So unless we have any more questions, there
was one that came up, and I've copied and pasted an answer from Kate Sang because somebody else had asked the same question. So if one participates in the stakeholder engagement groups, will they still be able to apply for EDICa funding calls? And Kate's response was, it would not preclude anyone from submitting. All proposals will be subject to a peer review process, and we would expect reviewers to declare any conflict of interest.
Yep, that's exactly what I thought might be Kate's response. Yeah, it's just a matter of being transparent about connections. So unless we have any further last-minute questions, and we're here till 2 if the demand is such. But otherwise, we'd just really like to thank you on behalf of EDICa, and just to kind of restate our contact details. Please contact us any outstanding questions and queries from today. The submission date is not for another 6 weeks. So please feel free to contact us between now and then. You don't have to get in touch with us tomorrow, let's say. And the website as well, please see that as being an important resource in terms of checking out any of the things that you've thought of or come across from today, or things that you just thought about from your own proposal crafting. So I'd just like to thank everybody who's been online today, and thank Jemina and Chiara and Fenella for some very important extra bits of information along the way.